Welcome back to Superbly Said, Advanced English Vocabulary and Phrases.
And just real quick, this material is actually from a SpeakDuo lesson, so you can go to SpeakDuo.com to meet new people from around the world who are practicing English on video calls to become more confident with their English-speaking abilities.
Exactly. So we're going to go straight into the idioms at hand today, and keep in mind this is specifically for advanced English learners. And getting right into our feedback, the introductory hook of the lesson material misses an opportunity to brand the learning experience and establish the target audience immediately.
Yeah, it really does. The weakness here is that the slides just start incredibly abruptly. Like a learner logs in and is just immediately hit with a reference to a Blackadder television episode reaction.
Right. Which is just bizarre.
Welcome the students to a focused, branded educational environment before launching into the complex idioms.
I mean, when you give a student administrative tasks and, random pop culture right out of the gate, you create massive cognitive friction.
Exactly. They are trying to orient themselves, and the material is just throwing disconnected data at them.
So the suggestion to fix this is to script a standardized, high-energy verbal opening for the instructors to use that explicitly names the curriculum series, states its purpose, and briefly pitches the core community value of the platform before diving straight into the content.
Right, so how does that actually sound in practice? Like, we need to give the creator the exact wording.
Well, the instructor notes should dictate this exact verbal script. They should say, "Welcome back to Superbly Said, Advanced English Vocabulary and Phrases."
And then the instructor should quickly mention this is from a SpeakDuo lesson and explicitly tell the students to go to SpeakDuo.com to practice speaking.
That frames the value proposition perfectly, honestly. But what happens right after that? Like, do we spend time explaining the pedagogical theory of idioms to the students?
No, and that is a crucial point. You have to instruct the teachers to otherwise go straight into the idioms at hand. Try not to introduce why we're introducing them, except to say it's for advanced English learners.
Oh, I see. Yeah. Getting straight to the meat of the lesson acts as this psychological cue. It tells the learner's brain that the administrative threshold has been crossed, and it's time to switch into advanced English mode.
Okay, so once you have successfully welcomed them into the room with that branded intro, what happens when they actually sit down to learn the material? Because right now they sort of hit a wall.
They do.
The definitions provided for the vocabulary phrases are functionally accurate but lack the comparative depth required for an advanced English learner to truly master them.
Yes, this is a huge issue. Relying on standalone, basic definitions like just stating to go in blind means to start without prior knowledge fails to address the nuanced boundaries of the idioms.
Right, because advanced learners already know the basic words.
Exactly. This leaves advanced learners vulnerable to using them unnaturally or, failing to distinguish them from simpler synonyms they already know. I mean, giving an advanced learner a basic definition is like giving a carpenter a hammer, but not telling them what kind of nails to use.
Wow, yeah.
They know what the tool is, but they are going to shatter the wood if they use it in the wrong context.
So are we essentially talking about pragmatics here?
Precisely. The mechanical understanding of English is already there for these students. It's the pragmatics, the social and contextual rules of the word that they actually need.
Okay, so the suggestion is to integrate a direct comparison framework into the presentation of each phrase, explaining the nuanced differences between the target idiom and a similar but different alternative.
Yes, let's map those boundaries out for the creator right now.
Sounds good.
So if we take the phrase to live up to, how do we contrast that? You have to contrast it explicitly with the simpler verb to meet.
Right, because you can meet a deadline, but you wouldn't necessarily live up to a deadline.
Exactly. You can explain that a person might meet a basic deadline, but they live up to a highly anticipated reputation or a massive expectation. The nuance is the emotional weight.
That is such a vital distinction. Let's run through the rest of them to give the creator a complete comparative framework.
Okay, hit me.
For to go in blind, you'd contrast it with to start. Like, to start is completely neutral, but to go in blind implies a specific lack of necessary preparation, which actually carries an element of risk.
Spot on. And what about out of the running? You should contrast that with the word rejected.
Mm-hmm.
Being rejected is just a binary refusal. But being out of the running implies a competitive race where you were once a viable candidate alongside others, but now you are no longer.
Yeah, building on that contrast, lucky break with a good outcome. A good outcome is general, right? It could just be the result of hard work.
Right.
But a lucky break requires a serendipitous element of chance and timing that actively pivots a difficult situation into a positive one.
Perfect. And for go swimmingly, contrast it with succeed. You can succeed after a grueling, terrible battle where everything goes wrong. But if a situation goes swimmingly, it was entirely frictionless.
That makes sense. And that actually leads nicely to on brand. Advanced learners might confuse this with typical.
Oh, totally.
But typical is just a statistical frequency. On brand relates to a cultivated identity or a specific public image.
Yeah, let's look at jump right in. Contrast it with start quickly. Starting quickly just denotes speed. You can start a boring chore quickly just to get it over with.
Yeah, exactly.
But jumping right in highlights a required element of real enthusiasm and proactive immersion.
Finally, for warm-up to, contrast it with agree with. You can intellectually agree with a fact immediately upon hearing it, but warming up to something is a gradual emotional shift towards acceptance over time.
Right. And if the creator maps out those comparative boundaries on the slides, the learners will stop making those awkward vocabulary errors.
Definitely.
But even if they understand the boundaries, the application currently falls flat. The current example sentences skew too heavily toward casual, everyday scenarios, missing the opportunity to prepare learners for high-stakes linguistic environments.
Looking at the slide copy, the weakness becomes obvious when we see sentences like, I jump right into reading a new book, or arriving late with coffee was on brand for his casual routine.
Right, those are fine, but
While those are grammatically correct, they do not sufficiently arm an advanced learner with the rhetorical tools needed for complex professional, academic, or formal testing situations.
exactly.
An advanced learner is often learning English to pass an immigration test or get a promotion.
Yeah, so the suggestion is to elevate the instructional value by demonstrating the use of these phrases in specific, targeted context, such as a conversation with work colleagues, interacting with a boss, or responding to standardized English test prompts.
I hear what you're saying about high-stakes environments, but I'd argue we shouldn't gut the casual examples entirely.
Oh,
If I am an advanced learner, I still go to coffee shops. I still talk to my friends in casual settings.
well, that is a fair pushback. And I agree we shouldn't delete them. The creator should keep the casual examples, but place them side by side with a corporate or testing example to provide maximum contextual contrast for the learner.
Okay, yeah. Let's look at out of the running as an example of that.
Sure. Imagine framing that for an IELTS Speaking Part 2 exam. The examiner asks about a professional setback. The learner says, after missing the crucial quarterly deadline, I was unfortunately out of the running for the regional director role.
Oh, wow.
That shows incredible lexical resource to an examiner.
It really does. Let's do a workplace scenario for go swimmingly. Keep the casual coffee shop usage on the slide, but pair it with a boardroom scenario. Picture an employee interacting with a boss, saying, the Q3 marketing meeting went swimmingly thanks to clear preparation and timing.
Perfect. And for warm-up too, you could demonstrate a conversation with work colleagues, like, it took a few weeks, but the engineering team is finally starting to warm up to the new software rollout. By showing both the casual and the professional usage, the learner maps the full utility of the phrase.
Absolutely. So we have fixed the intro, deepened the definitions with comparative pragmatics, and elevated the examples. But here is the biggest operational flaw in the entire deck.
Lay it on me.
The final breakout room segments lack a structured, interactive assessment mechanism to actively test and solidify the learner's retention of the highly specific nuances they just studied.
Ah, yes. Relying strictly on open-ended discussion prompts in the breakout rooms assumes the learners have perfectly internalized those complex definitions.
Right, and there is zero safety net here.
Exactly. It provides no immediate course correction if they misunderstood the vocabulary during the lesson. If a student thinks on brand just means popular,
A free-flowing discussion will only reinforce that incorrect assumption.
So, the suggestion to remedy this is to conclude the lesson by conducting a rigorous, structured multiple-choice quiz, where the instructor repeats the relevant phrase constantly to build memory association, announces options A, B, and C, gives the audience time to pause and think, and then provides immediate answers with a reminder of the earlier example to lock in the learning.
Okay, let's talk about how to actually design these quiz questions, because the distractors are the secret sauce here.
They really are.
This taps into the testing effect in cognitive science, forcing active recall rather than passive review. A weak quiz makes the wrong answers obvious. A strong quiz plays on literal translations. Let's walk through the exact mechanics of this 8-question quiz that the creator needs to build into the slides verbatim.
All right, I'll play the role of the instructor reading the questions.
Sounds good.
Question 1. What is the best definition for the expression to live up to? Is it option A, to successfully meet the highly anticipated expectations or directly match a previously established good reputation? Option B, to deliberately establish an entirely unrealistic professional standard that absolutely nobody could ever achieve? Or option C, to completely dedicate your entire life to a remarkably complicated and severely demanding new professional role?
Feel free to pause the audio here if you need to think about the answer.
The correct answer for to live up to is A. And to cement that, the instructor reminds them of the earlier nuance. Remember, we don't just meet a deadline, we live up to an expectation, like an employee living up to their stellar reputation during an evaluation.
Notice how option B played on the idea of an unrealistic standard. It tests if the student understands the feasibility aspect of the idiom.
Exactly.
Let's look at the next one. How is the idiom to go in blind accurately defined? Option A, to completely refuse to acknowledge a surprisingly obvious mistake during a remarkably tense corporate negotiation. Option B, to confidently start doing something without having any prior knowledge, specific information, or any preparation. Or option C, to deliberately ignore the highly complicated professional advice provided by deeply experienced senior executives.
Feel free to pause the audio here if you need to think about the answer.
And the correct definition for to go in blind is B. You might go in blind to a project if you didn't have time to read the brief, unlike a standard start where you are fully prepared.
Distractors A and C here are brilliant, by the way.
Thanks.
They play on the literal translation of being blind to advice or mistakes. Idioms are figurative, so literal translations are the perfect traps for advanced learners who are still translating in their heads.
Right, exactly.
All right, question 3. If someone is out of the running, what exactly does that mean? Option A, to physically collapse from intense exhaustion immediately after completing a surprisingly long and grueling race. Option B, to successfully completely utilize a remarkably great initial idea to make much further progress on an old project. Or option C, to absolutely no longer be considered as a potential candidate for a highly specific chance, job, or opportunity.
Feel free to pause the audio here if you need to think about the answer.
The correct answer for out of the running is C. This connects right back to that IELTS Speaking Part 2 example we discussed, where missing a deadline puts you out of the running for a promotion rather than just being rejected.
Let's keep moving. Question 4. What does a person mean when they refer to a lucky break? Option A, a completely unexpected piece of highly fortunate good luck that directly helps you succeed in a difficult moment. Option B, a remarkably sudden and entirely unexpected physical collapse of a highly complicated and massive structural pillar. Or option C, a significantly prolonged and intensely bitter argument between rival political groups or a deeply divided society.
Feel free to pause the audio here if you need to think about the answer.
The correct answer for lucky break is A. Again, distractor B tests the literal break of a structural pillar. And remember, a lucky break requires chance, not just a standard good outcome.
Yeah, moving on to question 5. Which of the following describes what it means for something to go swimmingly? Option A, to successfully construct a highly secure physical container specifically designed to transport volatile chemicals. Option B, to happen remarkably smoothly, completely perfectly, and entirely without encountering any problems or disruptions.
Or option C, to correctly predict the highly uncertain outcome of an upcoming global political event using advanced math models.
Feel free to pause the audio here if you need to think about the answer.
And the correct answer for go swimmingly is B. Think of our corporate example where the marketing meeting went swimmingly because it was totally frictionless, not just a basic success.
Next up, what occurs when a behavior or action is described as on brand? Option A, to actively and aggressively promote a completely unfamiliar new item during a surprisingly challenging new campaign. Option B, to deliberately forcefully extract the absolute final remaining small amount of a highly specific, rare new substance. Or option C, to perfectly match a highly specific person's widely recognized typical style, behavior, or overall personal image.
Feel free to pause the audio here if you need to think about the answer. For on-brand, the correct choice is C. Like arriving late with coffee being totally on-brand for a casual routine, it's about identity, not just what is typical.
Awesome. Question 7. What does it mean if you decide to jump right in? Option A, to confidently begin doing something absolutely immediately and with a tremendous amount of focus and real enthusiasm. Option B, to physically, violently, forcefully disrupt an organized public gathering in order to forcefully draw prompt attention. Or option C, to completely, intentionally, rapidly, physically dismantle a massive corporate business structure from its absolute root.
Feel free to pause the audio here if you need to think about the answer.
The definition of jump right in is A. And remember our comparison framework here, it is not just starting quickly, it is starting with enthusiasm, like jumping right into a new project with your work colleagues.
Finally, the last question for the material. What happens when someone manages to warm up to something? Option A, to safely, scientifically, successfully, securely contain highly volatile chemical substances inside an underground lab. Option B, to slowly and very gradually begin to genuinely like or totally accept a certain person, a new idea, or a situation. Or option C, to deliberately, intentionally, deeply, completely, thoroughly ignore absolutely all incredibly difficult expert advice.
Feel free to pause the audio here if you need to think about the answer.
The correct answer for warm up to is B. Just like warming up to a new software strategy proposed by your boss after initially doubting it. It's a gradual shift, not instant agreement.
You know, by explicitly stating that instruction to pause before giving the solution, the material accommodates different learning speeds perfectly.
Yeah, it really does.
It prevents the stronger, faster students in the breakout room from dominating an open discussion, ensuring every single learner actively assesses their own understanding against those cleverly designed distractors.
It completely transforms the pedagogical value of the deck.
It really does.
Let's recap the main points of our critique today. First, scripting a strong, branded introduction sets the tone immediately and reduces cognitive load. Second, adding comparative nuances to definitions helps learners draw boundaries between similar words using pragmatics. Third, elevating the examples to professional and testing contexts proves the high utility of the idioms. And lastly, structuring the ending with a robust multiple-choice quiz guarantees comprehension through active recall.
Exactly. So to summarize the actionable steps for the creator, add the exact superbly said verbal hook and the SpeakDuo pitch to the speaker notes to start the lesson. List contrasting synonyms like to meet versus to live up to right there on the definition slides. Rewrite at least half of the example sentences to reflect IELTS or workplace boardroom scenarios, keeping them side by side with the casual ones. Finally, build out those detailed A, B, and C quiz slides verbatim to verify comprehension at the end of the lesson.
We highly encourage the creator to implement these changes and submit the updated lesson slides back in for another critique. At the end of the day, advanced language learning is not just about handing someone a list of words, it is about building the architecture around those words so they know exactly how, when, and why to use them.
Well said. Giving your learners the right tools and the right context is the difference between surviving a conversation and truly mastering it. Thank you for joining us for this critique.